Hi, my name is Natalie and welcome to my channel Knitting-a-GoGo, and in the second part of this video I show you my process of knitting the 1960s Icelandic dress. So here I am doing the ferrule part of the chart from the pattern. As you can see here, I'm working on this bottom part of the skirt at the moment that I'm knitting with the three colours, the white, the oxblood red and also the burnt orange shades that I'm doing. So I'm just following this chart and I'm currently working on row 8 of this chart one here where it's using the three shades. So I just wanted to show you how I knit with the three different wools all together without them getting in a tangle. The first thing I do is I work out which ones I'm going to hold in what hands. So at the moment I've got one singular red one, or the oxblood red one here in the pattern. So I've decided to hold that in my left hand, which is my non-dominant hand, is this one. So I'm holding it in that one. And then on this side, the burnt orange shade is a more prominent stitch on this particular row. So I'm holding that in my right hand, which is my dominant hand. And then I'm also holding the white shade. There's only kind of one every so many stitches of the white shade here, and I'm also going to hold that in my right hand too. What I'm going to be doing is making sure the loops travel, so this one will go across here, and I'm going to make sure this white one always goes above the orange one so they don't all get into sort of a tangle when they're being knitted. If you keep them kind of separate in your hands, then it will just carry them along. And what the instructions also say is to keep the threads loose at the back here, and that's because what you don't want is with the actual pattern, as you can see I've started knitting here, you want it to sort of stay quite flat. What you don't want to happen is for this to pucker on here. So this is how I would knit the stitches on this pattern, and it's the second row of a repeat of what's already on the row below. So I'm just literally following this on the chart. So I'm just going to hold these here like this. Everyone has a different way of doing this, but this is my preferred way of how I do it without tangling the yarns. And obviously I'm just doing it here on the table, but normally the wools would be sitting in my bag potentially, or by me on a chair in my lap or somewhere like that. So first of all I'm just going to go into this one, so it's a white stitch, so I'm just going to keep that above the orange one so they don't tangle, and I'm just going to use my forefinger and I just wrap that round, but I make sure there's enough of a stretch here, or like a thread there, enough of the wool there, so there's enough for it to kind of not be too tight that these are all going to sort of pucker up. You want that really sort of laying flat, so I don't put too much tension on it and I just knit the stitch. They're all knitted stitches. Again, I just hold that again, and now this time on my forefinger I'm going underneath and I'm going to do 2 in the burnt orange stitch like so, and again just go around there. And now we come to this oxblood red stitch here, the darker stitch, and I'm going to be using my left hand here. So I pop the needle in and then I just literally hook it over with my right needle here with my right hand and pull that off there. And then it's back to the burnt orange stitches, the shade of that burnt orange, so they just go through, and then I literally, again, I mean normally I'd always be holding these, but just to show you sort of under the camera here, I've then pull that through like that, and always making sure I'm holding both of these, and I go through, and again through there, and again making sure I've got enough here at the back where it's not going to be puckered when it's knitted together. There's enough stretch there, enough of the looseness of that thread, and then I just pull that through as well, and then I knit 2 more of the burnt orange shade here, as you can see, and then the white again, just making sure that, you know, again, that's loose, and you can always stretch it here to make sure you're happy with the amount of elasticity you've got there. So you'll find them quite loose on the back travelling, but all neat, as you can see. I'm keeping the rows in a set order, or the threads or the walls in a set order, so they you know, they look neat on the back as well. And then you just continue until you get to the end of your round to start the next pattern part on here. So once I've got to the end of that round, making sure I don't lose the stitch marker in the place. This particular white shade is not going to be used again for 7 more rows, so what I'm going to do in view of that is I'm just removing it there with enough thread there to be able to weave it in the back of my work. And then what I would do is, when I get to the 8th row later on, I will then rejoin it, but I don't really want it travelling up the work, because it could also contribute to the puckering as it's going up. And then I'm literally just going to be knitting now with these just 2 shades, which actually is a bit easier because you're just holding two yarns, 1 in each hand. So I slip the stitch marker, and then on the chart it tells me that I need to knit 1 in the darker shade here, so I'm just going through there, and then I next need to knit 3 in this shade. So that's going to border off that white stitch quite nicely, I think, in the pattern. So I do 3 in that, then I do 3 in the darker shade. And again, I'm just using my left hand to hold the thread, not too tightly, to try and get an even tension. And then I just, with my right hand, which is, like I said, is my dominant hand, I then just use the needle to sort of pull the wool through into the stitch, so it sits there. And then again, I've got to knit 3 again of the orange shade here. So I'm just doing that here, and then again it's 3 back in the other one. So by looking at the chart, it sets of 3 of each shade, which is quite straightforward. So again, I just continue, and using this thicker wool, it's really nice because it's quite easy to kind of do the colour work when it's a thicker wool like this as well. It's sort of easier on the hands. So I'm just continuing round, and I'll just follow that round for the end of the round. And one other thing I just wanted to quickly mention as well, you might see here that obviously I spoke about it earlier, but there's this kind of like holes here that I made with the arm forwards right near the beginning of the cast on. And what will happen at the end is this will fold over this side, and I haven't quite read all the instructions, but I think it's going to be slip stitched underneath, and then it makes this really nice sort of picot edge, which I think will be really pretty at the bottom of the hem of the skirt, or the dress it's now being made into. So I'm really looking forward to continuing that chart work. What I really like about this is seeing it grow, seeing the pattern grow, and so far I feel quite happy with the colour choice that I've chosen. I think that's going to look really nice as a dress. So I've just popped out for a lunch break, and it's a beautiful sunny day, so I'm just enjoying the sunshine right now. And this bag is coming in super handy for carrying my knitting in, and the yarn is coming out really nicely in there, so I can keep it all nice and compact and tidy and clean. So I've now knitted the body part of this Lopi Icelandic dress, as you can see here. And what will happen is this will be hemmed and then sewn underneath to get that nice picot edge. And this is the ferrule part. It all currently needs to be blocked, so it's a bit crinkled at the moment until I actually block it. So this is kind of the skirt part here that I've knitted, and then it goes into the jumper, and then I've just popped the stitches on a stitch holder or a cable needle with these cool little caps that just screw on the cable needle and just stop the stitches from falling off. So this part will then be ready to be joined to the sleeves once they're knitted, and then there will be a circular yoke knitted. So the bottom part of the skirt and the ferrule pattern, in fact all of the skirt part, was knitted using 6mm needles, which I think is the US number 10 needle as per the pattern states. And then when it came to the shaping, it had, you sort of did the shaping and then you did an additional 3 inches, but you then changed to a 5mm needle for the 3 inches. But I didn't do the additional 3 inches it said for the skirt part of the pattern, because that part was just to turn over to make the waistband, so I omitted that. And I'm going to show you in a minute how I worked out my decreases, because I basically decreased as normal for the first decrease row of the skirt, and then there were 2 more decrease rows. But to make it decrease to a similar number of stitches to the start of the jumper part, I only went up to the 2nd decrease row, and I did a slight calculation just to amend that so I had the right number of stitches for the jumper part. Now on the jumper part it does say to knit it all in the 5mm needles, which I did, so, and that was the US 8 needles I think. I've quickly tried this on as well and it does fit. So I basically had to write out some calculations for working out the skirt shaping through to the jumper part, so it all knitted in one piece. And as you can see here, there was a rib part on this jumper, so I had to remove that from the original pattern, and then it said to increase into the stitches to get a total of 126 stitches, which is kind of the part I needed to start from. After I'd done the skirt part to the length that I wanted, I'd worked out the skirt length to roughly where I knew this jumper would finish with the length I needed here, which is a bit longer than shown on this one. I made it a bit longer. And originally on the 2nd decrease row of the skirt I would have had to decrease the stitches to a total of 122 stitches from 142. Now where I needed to start working from on the jumper part was to decrease down to 126 stitches, which is 4 stitches more. So I needed to just do a quick calculation to work out how I would do that. So I don't know if you can see here, but I've written it, this is my handwritten notes on it. So I basically had to deduct 126 stitches from 142, because currently on my needles at the time there was 142 stitches and I needed to reduce it to 126. So that meant there'll be a total of 16 stitches I needed to try and decrease evenly as I could in the next round. So what I did, I divided 16 by 142, which gave me a value of 8.875. I then rounded this number down to 8. So the number of stitches I need to decrease is 16. So I multiplied that number by 8, which basically means how many times 16 stitches divide into 142. And it didn't divide obviously into that amount, because that calculation shows you that there. So the next thing I could do was 128 stitches. It evenly divides into. So the next thing I did was minus 128, which was this value with the 16 times 8, from 142 stitches, which was what I currently had on the needle, to give me a total of 14 stitches, which basically means I divide this by 2 so that I knit half of this on each side of the round to make the overall decreasing more even, rather than just 14 stitches at the beginning. So these 14 stitches are basically the remainder stitches where I won't do any decreasing in. So the multiple of 8 stitches would be knit 2 together, knit 6, so I could allow for decreasing over 8 stitches, because you're trying to decrease every 8th stitch in effect. So the way I wrote my new calculation for this, so in the decrease round I've knitted it as follows. I knit 7 stitches, and then I do a repeat of knit 2 together, knit 6 to the last 7 stitches, and then I knit 7 stitches. So then I would have decreased a total of 16 stitches in the next round, leaving a total of 126 stitches on the needle, and that's how I got my 126 stitches. So next I want to show you how I cast on a sleeve using the magic loop technique, and the beginning of the sleeve is a rib pattern, 1 by 1 rib pattern here. See, so it's a bit of a dark colour. So in the pattern it states to use double pointed needles to do this part of the knitting, but I prefer just using a circular needle that's slightly longer than the knitting, and I only have to divide the stitches over 2 needles rather than dividing them over normally 4 needles. So on this sleeve example I knitted the beginning of the rib with the 5mm needles, and then also the fair isle part of the pattern as well with the 5mm needles, and then I had to do a couple of increases on either side of the stitch marker, and once I just went into knitting the white, it said to change over to the 6mm needles, or US 10 as the pattern states. And what I find helpful, what you can see I've done on here, on the chart, I tend to highlight them as the rows as I go. I find if I highlight each row as I go, it's really easy for me to sort of glance down and see which row I'm on next without losing my place. And obviously I photocopied this so I could do that, just for personal use, not to obviously distribute. So the pattern says to start the sleeves with a 5mm needle. Obviously it said double pointed needles, but I'm doing the magic loop technique, so I'm going to use circular needles. So I'm using them from this groovy circular needle kit here. There. These cubic needles, the wooden ones. In the interchangeable set there was also a 40cm cable, so I'm just using that to attach on the needles. And then you have this little like key here just to tighten the needle so it doesn't come off mid knitting, which would be quite annoying. So I'm just tightening them up there, and then I just do the same for the other side. So the pattern also states to cast on using the black wool. For my one I'm doing, it's the ox blood red colour. So first of all I just make a little slip loop there, and then I get my needle and I just pop it on there. I'm doing the cable cast on for this as well, which I think works well with a rib. Gives it a bit more elasticity. So it says to cast on 28 stitches, so I'm just going to do that now. So what I've actually done is I've cast on a total of 29 stitches, and I'm going to show you why I've done that instead of the 28 in a moment. So what I next need to do is I need to divide these stitches like this. I pull the cable through, so roughly half. It doesn't matter if it's not exact, you're just wanting to be able to knit it in the round. So see there, and I just pull that through. I'll just pull that needle through. So next, what you need to do when joining this in the round is make sure you don't twist your stitches. So you need to make sure when that goes all the way round, it's all going, this ridge is going to go round the same direction all the way round, and they're not twisted round, so when you're going to join, that's all twisted, because it's not going to knit in a tube. It's going to be all, it's going to knit two awkward ways, and it won't be straight. It'll be wonky. And, you know, part of the tube knitting one way and part of it knitting the other. It just goes really strange. So you don't want that to happen. So you want it to all knit together in the round correctly and straight. So what I then do next is I pop a stitch from, this is the right side, so I pop a stitch from the right side over to the other needle. Sorry, it's a bit difficult for me to show you on camera like this. It's a bit not my normal way I hold the needles, like that. And then what I do, I don't know if you can see here, sorry, so it's looking very awkward on camera, is, oh, I just need to pull that wall back, make sure the wall's on the wrong side of the work. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to literally pull this stitch over like this. So I will now have 28 stitches on the needle. And then what I then do is I just quickly pop that back to the other needle. So I'm just going to pull these through like this. So I'm going to use the two ends here, because you've got one from when you did your slip knot or slip loop, and I'm just going to knit both of those like that. And the reason I do that at the beginning is just it gives it a nice ridge here, so there's not kind of a, it sort of looks even all the way round. Otherwise I find if I didn't pass that stitch over, you might have a bit of a dip in the actual cuff. So I don't know if you can see here in the other one, it's pretty even all the way around here. It doesn't, you almost can't see where the join is. It's a really dark colour, so I'm not sure you can see it very well there, but basically you can't see where the join is, and I find doing that method really helps with that. So then all I do is I continue to, I knit one, then purl one, and I just do a 1 by 1 rib all the way round. Now you see I haven't put a stitch marker on here, and I find as long as I keep this part separate, you can put a stitch marker on, but it will always, unless you sort of move another stitch across, it will always sort of fall off your needle, and as it grows you can add a stitch marker. But I find because you've got this loose tail here, you'll find as you start knitting around and you've got this gap, you'll know that's the beginning of your round, I find, and I find that's the easiest thing to do with that. So I'm just going to continue to knit these stitches, or in knit 1 purl 1 rib as per the pattern. And then when you get to the last stitch on that needle, which is a knit stitch, on the way it's divided up, it's gone into a knit stitch, I just pull this loop again, and I just gently pull the needle through to that set of stitches, and then I just gently pull this needle out, and you've still got this loop, and then I just turn the needle to continue on those. So I just last knitted a knit stitch, so now I need to purl, and it should be knit purled to the end. Sorry, I keep going off camera there. Like this. I'm finding these needles very nice to work with. Really soft on the hand, easy to grip because they're this cubic style. I'm really enjoying working with them. And then I've just got another knit purl there. And then you just continue doing the same on here. So again, you start again with a knit row, and what I would do is, so I'd knit that first stitch, and you've got 2 loops actually for the first stitch because you've used this, you know, you wrap this round as well, this end of yarn part. So you just knit obviously just with one part now of the wool, and I just make sure I pull that really tight so that I'm not going to have a gap here when I knit, and then just continue knitting in the round. And then once I've finished this ribbing, I will then go into the Fair Isle pattern as per the other sleeve, and then into the white and knit to the length, which I think it says in the pattern is 17 inches. I might adjust that according to my arm length. I'll make a decision when I start knitting up the sleeves. The other thing to be mindful of, because you're doing the same two sleeves, is always make a note of your rows, which I do. So, and then I just again write on my photocopied pattern how many rows the rib part took, so I can get them symmetrical and match. So I've now joined the main body and the sleeves for the yoke, and as you can see I've now made a start on the pattern that I need to knit for this. What I had to do when I finished the body and the sleeve parts before I joined them, so I had to cast off 6 stitches, 3 stitches each side of the stitch marker on these, and then obviously on this side too. And I think what happens is I seam that at the end so that they'll be sewn together. And it says on the instructions to initially work with a circular needle and then go down to double pointed needles, but again I'm just going to use the magic loop technique as I knit this up and just pull the cable through as and when it gets thinner. I think there's 3 decreased rows in total. I think there's 25 rows. Let me just check that. Yeah, there's 20. So there's 25 rows in total that I need to do on the yoke for the pattern. So it's going to be this pattern at the top here that I'm doing. So I'm just going to go and finish this now. And then after I've done the pattern of the yoke, I need to continue in this shade and do some rounds of rib. I think again it's 1 by 1 rib as per the sleeve cuff to finish that. So I've now weaved in all the loose ends that were as a result of doing the Fair Isle pattern on this dress. That took maybe a good half hour to 45 minutes to weave those in, because there was quite a few to do in the end, because obviously there's a bit of the colour on each of these here with the different colours on the cuffs, around the yoke, and also on the hem as well. So the next thing I needed to do was the underarms, where you need to stitch in basically where you did the join of the yoke to the sleeves and the body, so it doesn't so you've got some movement basically in the underarm. You tend to have a gap left that you then need to seam up afterwards, like I said, just so you've got that movement there. Otherwise, if you try and knit it all together with this as well, you get this real kind of bunched up, like very restricted underarm movement, almost like a gusset in effect, but without obviously knitting in a gusset or anything. So this is what it looks like open once you've knitted everything in the round, and this is the one I've already pre-seamed just to show you here what it looks like. And as you can see, I've matched it. I've used a mattress stitch on this. It just said in the instructions to seam it, so I've used a mattress stitch and I've just joined it so the knitting pretty much sort of matches all underneath the arm, as you can see here, and then that just kind of sits underneath like that, as you can see the wall. So what I'm going to show you now is just how I do the mattress stitch on this. And what I've done, I've left a long enough end on here when I've done my join of the parts. I've left enough wool from one of these sections, the sleeve section, where I haven't had to sew in another bit of yarn to then join it. I'm hoping this will be long enough to kind of stitch it all together, and that's a key tip I would recommend when you join in your other yarns for sewing the yoke and everything into the round on this style of garment. It's always good to try and leave a long end if you can, just so it just avoids having to weave in more yarn and everything like that you can just use one already attached. So it just helps with the bulk, especially on a thicker wool like this, and then you can just join it in. And the needle again I'd use is one that's designed for knitting wool, so it's got like quite a large eye in it, and then you can just literally, you don't even need to pin it when it's a smaller section really, you can kind of see, and also such big yarn as well, you can kind of just see where the join is. So you want to sew it all as close to the edge as possible. So what I'm going to do is initially just come in the bottom of the stitches here, and I'm just going to pop round the beginning part here as well. And what you ideally want, you want that all to line up and match when you're sewing it. So I'm just going to come in a couple more stitches along here just to get that started at a point where that's all going to sew sort of evenly across on that part there. And I'm just going to literally, I'm going to just bring that through there, and then I'm just going to go underneath a couple, almost like one of the stocking stitches here, and go through there. And you're literally just weaving your needle underneath like this on here. I'm hoping I've left this tail end longer here. Ideally you'd maybe leave it slightly longer than I did, but I thought that would probably be enough for this length. And it's quite quick to do once you get in the rhythm of it. It's quite quick to just sew underneath these stitches. Like I said, doing a mattress stitch, which is what I prefer for the seaming on this. It hasn't given a particular stitch to use on this particular part. Sometimes you weave it in with a knitted stitch style, but it doesn't say to, normally the instructions would say if you needed to do that, and it doesn't on this one. And I think there's enough room on here where you probably don't need to do that so much. As you can see, that's kind of weaved in there as well, and they're all sewn together now. And then I'm just going to finish off at the back. I'm just going to tie it off, just form a knot through the stitches. Luckily I've got enough yarn here to do that, which is good. I'm just going to pull through there and there, and then you just weave through a few of the stitches. And fasten off. And there we have our underarm seams completed. So now what I'll need to do is finish off the hem, and then I can get this all blocked. So how I'm going to sew the hem personally, what I would do is I'm just going to catch the bottom kind of ridge of the original cast on edge here. I'm just going to pop my needle through like this and just pull the yarn through, and then I'm just going to go underneath and just catch a stitch underneath. So I'm going to do kind of like a whip stitch edging on this, so I kind of catch the wool over the top, and then I go underneath and just sew kind of underneath. So again, I'm just going to go under a couple of stitches here. Sorry, again, it's such a dark colour, I'm not sure if you can see that well here on the camera. And I'm just going to pull that through. Like I said, it's a bit of a pull through the thread because I've left this quite long, but I think because it's quite a thick yarn, I think that'll be okay. I don't think it's going to thin too much. So I think I will be able to sew it on quite a longer length, and it's not going to really knot because again it's quite a thick yarn or wool that I'm using here, the Icelandic wool. And then as I go along them, I'm going to remove a pin as I go, so it's sort of not in the way whilst I'm sewing along. And again, I'm just going to go sew through, and then I'm just going to whip stitch over into like the next part, just to sort of move the needle along and the wool as I'm going. And because it's underneath, it's not going to show the stitching on the top here. You're just putting that underneath, and I'm just going to try and go through every ridge. It's quite nice because this cast on edge here gives a nice, because I did the cable cast on, it gives me a nice defined ridge here to know where to sort of sew my thread through on each stitch. And again, just go underneath. And up. And I'm just going to continue that around the whole of the bottom of this hem. And there's the yoke. So I just wanted to give you an update regarding this dress that I've been making. We've had a bit of a cold spell in the UK here, so I was hoping last weekend to finally wear this dress. I thought, well, it'll be so warm and lovely and snug, but I've encountered an issue with the hem, unfortunately. So it's a picot edging on here, as you can see, and I thought sewing it under as the instructions and the weight of the wool would keep it down after blocking. And unfortunately that is not the case. Within literally 5 minutes of putting it on, the hem started to raise. So we've got this kind of weird thing going on at the bottom at the moment that's a bit strange, as you can see here. It would literally stay straight for about 5 minutes and then it will rise again. As a hand knitwear designer, I was slightly concerned that might happen, but I thought with the weight of the yarn, it hopefully wouldn't. It would be okay. And of course I've knitted it from the bottom up as well. So I had another look at the pattern as well, and actually in hindsight looking at it, this actually does look quite curved and wavy here. So I think they've had the same issue. And unfortunately, in my experience of having this issue with any hem that does that, no amount of blocking solves it, unfortunately. I mean, I did leave this on for a couple of days, blocked and pinned, you know, dried to dry naturally as well. And yeah, initially I pulled it off and it was like quite straight. As soon as I put it on, like I said, as I'm wearing it, it's rising up. So that wasn't going to work. So I really want to wear this dress. So I think what I'm going to have to do next is, unfortunately, unpick the hem. So cut the threads of where I've whip stitched it. Now I've done that quite close, so I've really got to have a look and check I cut that and not the actual knitting. But I should be able to do that okay once I get a starting point. And then what I'm actually going to do is unpick the cast on edge, which isn't as easy as if you unpick on the top. It's a bit more knotted and everything. So I've got to try and unpick that and remove the picot kind of pattern is the plan. So apologies if you can hear some noise at the moment. There's some construction work going on, so I'm not sure if that's coming through on the microphone. So I will try and talk over that. So yeah, the plan is I will then unpick the gap where that was made for the picot edge in the yarn overs, and so basically try and unpick it as much of this as I can, and then I will re-knit it in a garter stitch around the bottom, and I'm hoping then that will give it the weight it needs to stay straight and it won't have this problem I'm currently experiencing with it. Then the other slight issue I've got is I haven't got any of this red yarn left because I used quite a bit of it in the actual knit in the end for the edgings. So if I can't do enough of the stitching in that colour, I'm probably going to have to do the bottom in the sort of more pumpkin orangey kind of colour. So we'll see how that works. So nothing is always perfect on these things. You think, oh, I thought, you know, initially it'd be such an easy knit, and it was an easy knit. I was just really hoping once I blocked this it would stay straight, being in view of the weight of the yarn, but no, it wants to curl out. And I just can't wear it like that. It's just, as you can see, I mean, I don't even need to put it on, you can just see. You're just gonna have this weird thing happening on the hem. And you know, this can happen when you have a stocking stitch. And like I said, not a garter stitch at the beginning. And I must admit, when I started the project, I did consider doing it garter stitch and not this picot edging, because I sort of noticed it slightly on there, but it didn't look too bad, and I thought with the weight, that'll be all right. But anyway, so I'm gonna crack on and do that, because I would actually like to wear it over this winter before it starts getting warmer and it's gonna be too hot to wear this.
And here is the finished dress.
So what did you think of the dress? So I just wanted to share my thoughts of the finished dress that I've made. And overall, I'm really happy with the conversion from the skirt to the sweater to the dress. I really like the shape and style. The only thing I would have perhaps done differently is maybe made the arms slightly longer. I did it as per the pattern measurements for the sweater. Well, I naturally personally have longer arms, so perhaps I should have done them slightly longer, but I wasn't sure if I'd have enough wool to do more. As it turned out, I would have done, but if I was to make it again, I would know to just lengthen the arms slightly, but it's still fine, you know, it's really wearable. So you may have noticed in the final reveal that the hem was slightly different to how I said I was going to do it. If you remember, it was kind of curling outwards with the picot edging, and it just wasn't sitting well at all, and it was not a wearable dress as the hem was. So I said I was going to do a garter stitch edging. Now, unpicking the bottom when it's been cast on takes some time, in fact probably a few hours to unpick it because of the picot edging. I had to unpick right down to that picot edging part, and then I knitted a garter stitch hem around the bottom back from where I'd picked to on the actual bottom part of the dress, thinking it would then sit fine. And I did a knit row purl row to try and get a true kind of garter stitch on the bottom, and I knit because I was knitting it in the round rather than if it was just straight row knitting and you would just knit each row. So I kind of knitted and purled each row, and unfortunately it still did the same thing. It wasn't heavy enough, it just kept pinging back out. So in the end I decided what was an issue around the bottom was the amount of stitches. It was quite wide, and that was fine. It was a tension for the ferrule, but for the hem I think that was one of the reasons it was sort of rolling back out in areas of the hem. So in the end I decided the knitting needed to be brought in, but I also decided that the garter stitch border or a picot still would have the issue of potentially pinging up as it was. And I think it's because of the thickness of the wool. It just had this kind of twist that made it want to do that. So I decided in the end the best, after unpicking it again several hours later, I decided the best thing to do would be to do a ribbed hem, like on the neckline here. So I did a rib in the end on the bottom for about 2.5 centimetres. And prior to actually doing that, what I did is I knitted 2 together around the whole round to make it tighter, and with a rib you can have the stretch, and then I just cast off with a stretchy rib cast off around the edge. So yeah, I did it for 2.5 centimetres and it worked. So dividing the stitches by 2, adding a stretchy rib and casting off in a stretch rib means that it's got the flexibility but also comes in now, as you just saw in the reveal. So it now means I can wear it. So I know going forward, if I was to make it again in different colours perhaps, then I would definitely do a rib border this time. And again, like I said, if you look at the picture, you can kind of see on the skirts how wide they are and how they are kind of having a tendency to seem to want to sort of like ping out a bit on that one. And this was a slightly different yarn, so maybe it didn't do that quite as much, although apparently from what I gathered, this Alafossi Lopi wool is apparently the same as what this Reynolds one was back in the 1960s. But either way, it needs to be wearable for me, so that I'm pleased with that. So apart from the issues I had with the hem, the overall knitting experience of this dress was lovely. I really enjoyed it. Such a super enjoyable knit and so quick. Super quick. The ferrule was fast because it's thicker yarn. I really enjoyed using the Joy of Knitting needles on this particular project. This was the first time I used them, and these needles were just brilliant. They were great for using for this knitting. I absolutely love them, and I've been using them ever since when I've had any project that's higher than a sort of 4mm needle, or from a 4mm needle upwards to, these are an 8mm they go up to in the ranges, and they're just really nice on the hands, really nice to work with. So I'm pleased I got this set, and going forward I'm going to be using it a lot more. And with regards to the colours, I changed it to what was actually on the original. So the reason I was drawn to this one was because of the striking contrast of these colours on here. And that's what drew me to this initial pattern when I initially saw it online. I thought, wow, that's really cool. I'm not sure quite what happened, because I'm not sure if it was because it was maybe autumn when I started looking into making this and getting the yarn, and was that influenced by my colours. But I feel the colours I ended up picking weren't quite this. In this image I kind of thought it was like an orange, and I picked like an orange, but on further reading it's actually red and black, and I've picked orange and kind of a burgundy colour, as you can see. So in the end I don't feel it was quite as bold and striking as what I was initially drawn to. So I think it maybe looks more like 70s, or even possibly more modern, because I think the colours are actually more subtle than what the original pattern was. But I still really like it. I love the colours that I've chosen. It's almost like a purpley burgundy berry colour, this darker one, and I like that. But yeah, if I'd wanted to copy the pattern exactly, I should have picked like a bright red and a black against the white. But like I said, I'm happy with my colour choice for me personally. So I hope you enjoyed the video and seeing how I converted this pattern from a skirt and sweater into a dress. If you'd like to see more of my videos on knitting vintage patterns from the 1960s and 70s with my own knitting tips that I include, please feel free to subscribe to my channel on the button below. And once again, thank you for watching.